Part 101. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1003. Fan Zijin rubbed Xiao An's hair, who was sleeping soundly, and stared at the bruise on his cheeks for a moment in a daze. This was obviously the mark left by the sweeping fist, and it was a good thing it didn't land on the face, otherwise it would hurt the bones. Sitting on the side, Xiao wiped away tears, and said, "Those foreigners are too much, Lord, let's just forget about it. Didn't you hear from the little lions that those two foreign children were more seriously injured than them? It's unavoidable that we, a group of adults, would look aggressive to settle accounts with the two injured children, deal with the adults in their family." Xiao's eyes lit up. "That's right, those foreigners are begging the master to do things now." Fan Zijin's eyes flickered coldly, and he had already thought about how to deal with those foreigners. In his opinion, if those foreigners hadn't used Joao and the others as friends with the four children for their own benefit, this dispute would have never happened. So the Portuguese envoys were angered. Fan Zijin got up and said, "I'm going to go to the Yamen today and I won't come back until very late. You take the two children to the next door, and help Aling also take Hutu and the others. I heard that she is going out today." Xiao hurriedly nodded in response, and sent Fan Zijin out. "Be careful on the road." After the people had gone far away, Xiao went back, and asked Mother Xia suspiciously, "Why is Aling going out at this time?" Xia Momo smiled and said, "I heard that the princess has invited foreigners to talk about things in Wangfulu." Xiao was a little worried. "Aling, don't just try to find a place for the children, it would be bad if things get too big." Mother Xia smiled and said, "Madam, don't worry, the princess has a sense of propriety, and she should teach those foreigners a lesson. Using children to achieve their goals is a method that they don't even bother to use in the backyard, but they are very proficient in using it." Xiao nodded and continued to guard Xiaoan. At this moment, little Xiong and Xiaobao were also standing in front of the younger brothers' beds. After seeing their miserable appearance, little Xiong whispered, "Brother Xiaobao, how about we drag Joao into the alley and beat him up? It depends on the situation. If Joao is seriously injured, we will find the Portuguese envoy. If the injury is not serious, we will beat him like a tiger's head." Little Bear nodded coldly. How could his brother be so easy to bully? After Mu Yangling got dressed, he studied the price list sent by Zhu Yang, put it down and said, "It's too cheap, copy it again, and add 20% to everything." Li Shun has been helping Mu Yangling's housekeeper, so he knows the price outside. Hearing this, he was taken aback. "In this way, wouldn't it be higher than our domestic price? Isn't the silk, tea, and porcelain sold to foreigners more expensive than those sold domestically? Now this kind of mirrors and clocks can only be made by our workshop, and domestic sales are in short supply, let alone exported. If I want to sell them, they have to accept at my price. But you said before that you should be more friendly to foreigners, and the price you set is a little cheaper than domestic sales, and you said that you want to open up foreign markets." Li Shun secretly glanced at the princess and sighed. It really is because the young masters were bullied and angry. You must know that these business princesses are all entrusted to Zhu Yang, and they rarely come forward in person. The foreigners also inquired about this information, and were very happy. The princess seldom came out to discuss business in person, but this time she invited them to Wangfulu to discuss in person. Know the same. The foreigners also put a lot of emphasis on dressing up and arriving at Wangfulu ahead of time, and at the same time, Mu Yangling also set off with high spirits. Zhu Yang, as the steward of the workshop, and Xiao Ting, as the servant who ran errands beside Mu Yangling, also went together. Zhu Yang felt that letting the princess and a group of foreigners sit at the same table was insulting and indecent, so he notified the shopkeeper of the restaurant yesterday and asked him to empty out all the things in the private room and put them on the seats. The etiquette system sits in separate seats. Later, Thinking that foreigners don't know how to make seats cross-legged, they replaced the low tables with high tables and the mats with high chairs. Each person still has a seat, facing each other on the left and right. The first seat is naturally theirs. The noble princess is seated. The box was very large, and the screens, soft couch, round table, piano, and chess and other things that had been placed before were all removed, but the 10 seats facing each other were really empty, so the shopkeeper asked Zhu Liang in a low voice, "Mister, shall I call some players for you? It would be good to let them play some vocal music through a screen." Zhu Liang gave him a sideways glance, and said, "No, it's good as it is, so as not to frighten foreigners. Who is our princess going to talk about business with?" Zhu Liang had a basis for saying this. It is said that when a group of foreigners landed ashore and brought a lot of gems and spices, the local merchants held a banquet. The banquet was not grand, but invited some actors to sing and dance, and everyone sat in separate seats. Even the delicacies were only slightly higher than the usual small family banquets, but the foreigners were very grateful, and they had already arrived at the state banquet by themselves, and praised the businessman affectionately. "They are just businessmen, they are not even officials. How dare they hold a state banquet, if they don't know that foreigners don't understand the rules, they almost think that foreigners are mocking them." The shopkeeper also knew that the young masters of the Wangfu and the Duke's mansion had suffered a lot from fighting with foreigners, so when they heard Zhu Liang satirizing foreigners, they smiled in response and hurriedly invited them to go up. But he couldn't help but wonder, the son in the mansion was beaten up just the day before, why is the princess going to entertain foreigners today? The city of Guangzhou is small, and although it has become much more prosperous in the past 2 years, any troubles can spread throughout the city in a short time, so the fight between the young masters of the Wangfu and the foreign teenagers in the Chamber of Commerce has not been reported by Hudu. It spread all over Guangzhou before reaching home. This is also the reason why the doctor who treated Zhou couldn't help tormenting him. Those young gentlemen are so cute, smart, and caring. They usually run up to help him when they meet him carrying a heavy medicine box on the road. Carry a distance. The shopkeeper also likes the young masters of Wangfu and Guagongfu. Where can I find such cute noble children, who don't chase chickens after dogs, don't bully goodness, and don't embarrass their merchants, even if they drag a bucket from time to time? Seafood is for sale, and that is up to them to choose. Sometimes they get generous and wave their hands, buy one and get one free. Such a good man is beaten by foreigners. If he is not afraid of smashing the signboard, he really wants to eat the food that foreigners eat. Add a teaspoon of salt. As soon as Mu Yangling entered the box and saw how the box was arranged, he raised his eyebrows, gave the shopkeeper an approving look, and sat down on the first seat. The invited businessmen from various countries took their seats after greeting Mu Yangling, turning a blind eye to the delicious food on the table, and only looked at her with piercing eyes. Mu Yangling didn't beat around the bush, and clapped his hands for someone to deliver the things, saying, "This time I invite you to come here to discuss business." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1004. Carried up are all kinds of glazed products and clocks. Full-length mirror, vanity mirror, and a small mirror that is only half the size of a palm, a set of tall glass cups, crystal clear, and a crystal-like vase made of glass. The most eye-catching thing is that it is placed on the other side clocks and watches, big clocks with patterns of rocks spreading their wings, flowers blooming and riches, quaint pendulum clocks, and all kinds of pocket watches. The numbers on them are all familiar Arabic numerals, not Daki Chinese numerals. Foreigners have long heard that Wang Hao's workshop can make these things, and some of them even went to see a few things on purpose. Although they are interested in clocks and watches, because they don't know the words on them, they can only turn their eyes regretfully. It was only placed on glazed products, but now they have seen clocks with Arabic numerals engraved on them. Foreign businessmen exclaimed on the spot, they estimated their value as soon as they saw these things. Now their country can only make bulky pendulum clocks, which are incomparable with such exquisite clocks. They looked at each other and praised, Princess Rongjun, this is indeed a good thing, but you know, in your country, silks and satins are still the most attractive to us, and if the price of these things is too high, we may not be able to buy them. After all, the profit is limited. Andre and Mu Yangling are relatively familiar, so they asked the price instead of everyone. I don't know what price the princess offered. Mu Yangling took the quotation from Li Shun and said, this is the price list. Mu Yangling said with a smile, we are all businessmen. If you earn something, I can earn more, so don't worry. The price I give you is the most favorable. The foreigners were speechless when they saw the most favorable price on the price list. Although they didn't know how much the palace gave the Daki merchants, they could guess their approximate cost from their selling prices. We are all people who are used to doing business and know these market conditions best, but the price Mu Yangling gave them is definitely much more expensive. Andre said with a sullen face, Princess Chi, this price is too high, and it is impossible for all of us to accept it. Mu Yangling smiled and said, I know this price looks expensive, but it is not expensive compared to the cost I paid. In order to research this thing, I paid a lot of scientific research costs. I didn't make any money back, and these clocks and watches are specially made to meet your national conditions, and they are the best of the best. To be honest, if it wasn't for friendly cooperation, I would not set the price so low. Foreigners are very interested in these two products, but they all feel that Mu Yangling's asking price is too high, and they all refuse to accept it. Mu Yangling can only regretfully say, for the sake of friendly cooperation, I reserve these products for you. If you don't want to, then forget it. Probably because he felt embarrassed to make a trip in vain, in order to build a good relationship, Andre offered that they could discuss some other business, such as if the palace had silks, tea bricks, and porcelain, they would be happy to cooperate. But Mu Yangling shook his head and said, the three businesses of our palace are all united with the Anglo government. If you want to talk, you might as well go to the steward of Fan's mansion. I can ask Zhu Liang to recommend it for you. The foreigners could only force a laugh. The stewards of the Fan mansion were as smart as their masters. As long as it was a profitable business, they would come to their door. The business failed. Mu Yangling didn't seem to be in a hurry to get angry, but greeted everyone to eat with a smile, and Andre looked at the things in the field and asked regretfully, Princess Chi, can't the price be lower? If it's less, we might be able to wrap up all your goods. Mu Yangling laughed and said, thank you Mr. Andre for your kindness, but the success rate of my workshop is still very low. The price is indispensable, and the quantity is not too much. If you don't want it, the ship I will hand over to the Zhou family later will be shipped overseas. Mu Yangling thought for a while and added, this is already what I can give lowest price. Looking at Mu Yangling, who was not worried about sales, the smile on the corner of Andre's mouth froze. He exchanged glances with the others, and felt that what Mu Yangling said might be true. He had never heard of this person who would doing business. Sure enough, like his husband, don't you know that negotiating business is asking for prices and haggling on the floor? How can you give a reserve price as soon as it comes up? Now the foreigners hesitated, and Andre thought for a while and said, then I'll try to buy a wall clock first. Don't think that the quantity is too small and refuse to sell it. Mu Yangling smiled and said, no, you are friends of Daki, I will ask Director Zhu to take care of you. Seeing this, other foreigners also expressed that they would buy one or two items first to test the market reaction. Regardless of whether the item could be sold after returning to China, they would treat it as a concubine to curry favor with Dichi. The 10 foreigners just divided up the things they brought and refused to place an order. Director Zhu felt a little pained when he thought of the foreign clocks and watches piled up in 2 warehouses in the workshop. Mu Yangling was smiling, as if she was very happy. Of course she was happy, she just came to make them regret it. After eating, everyone went back to their homes. As soon as Mu Yangling got into the carriage, he asked Zhu Liang, "How many masters did you invite?" "Yes, just now the guards were talking back and forth. The patriarch of the Zhou family has brought other patriarchs to wait in the mansion." "Madam, this time there are also big businessmen from Jiangsu and Zhejiang. They were not invited, so they could only sit in the concierge. The slaves reckon that they also came for the clock and glass." "Are there any sea merchants?" "Yes," Mu Yangling said with a smile, "then invite them into the mansion together." The people who came were all big businessmen from Guangdong and Jiangsu and Zhejiang. Because of Fan Zijin and Qi Heiren, the Zhou family still stood at the top even though their financial resources were not as good as those of the big businessmen in Jiangsu and Zhejiang. There was a screen in the room, and Mu Yangling came in directly from behind, and was stunned when he saw the screen, thinking that she had fought with soldiers, but seeing a few businessmen still using this thing. Zhu Liang turned a blind eye to the concubine's eyes. "There should be rules. Foreigners don't know the rules, but it's better to be more cautious when dealing with people from Daqi." Mu Yangling sat down on the seat. The businessmen outside noticed that the people behind the screen had sat down, bowed their heads in salute, and respectfully divided into two rows and stood below. Mu Yangling didn't beat around the bush, and directly stated his purpose. "I know that you are all here for the things in the glass workshop and the watch workshop, and I don't engage in monopoly. As long as you have money, I will sell it to you, just the production capacity of these two workshops is limited now, and the goods that can be produced are few, and now the order in my hand has been scheduled until next year." The merchants in Jiangsu and Zhejiang were so annoyed that they wanted to hit the ground, while the merchants in Guangdong who had already placed orders and even received the goods grinned happily. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1005. Mu Yangling continued, "However, I plan to expand the two workshops. In the past, as long as it was an order, no matter how big or small, our workshop would accept it, and because of the shortage of goods, we also set a limit. Each person can only buy 1,000 pieces at most within half a year. I plan to operate separately now. The smaller workshops are dedicated to accepting small orders, which is still such a limit, while the larger workshops are to accept large orders from you people. The upper limit for each person is 10,000 pieces per year." Get mixed up again. Everyone's eyes lit up, and they couldn't control their excitement. This meant that they only had to line up with those who could afford to place large orders, and the speed would be much faster. Most importantly, the amount they could get a year changed directly from 2,000 to 12,000. However, I have a request. For those who have placed the largest order, all foreign clocks and glazed products that must be placed with 1,000 orders will be sold overseas. If they are sold domestically to foreigners, the price cannot be lower than the cost price I sell to you." Mu Yangling smiled, and said to everyone word by word, "Don't worry, you won't suffer, but the loss on the road may be a bit big, so you have to bear it yourself." The masters looked at each other in blank dismay, and came back to their senses after getting the quotation. The price of the things sold to foreigners was 20% higher than that sold to them. If the price of clocks and watches has increased because of different numbers in them, why is the price of glass products? These things are exactly the same as those sold domestically. There is only one thought left in the hearts of the masters: the princess is designing foreigners. As long as you agree to this condition, I can fulfill the largest order you have placed now before the Chinese New Year. Everyone's eyes lit up, and they agreed without even thinking about it. An order of 10,000 may seem like a lot, but taking advantage of the New Year's goods trend during the Spring Festival, they will definitely make a fortune. Isn't it just an extra order of 2,000? The higher the price, the higher the price. They are slowly sold overseas. There is always a way. It's convenient for maritime merchants, just pull it directly on the ship, and it should be sold out after a trip, and if it is not sold out, it can be delivered as a gift. It is easier for merchants who do not do maritime trade, just go back and discuss with the maritime merchants, or help them take out the goods, or sell them at a low price. Several people wanted to sell well, so they scrambled to place orders on the spot. Each of them ordered 10,000 orders, and it took half a month to wait for one person behind. Mu Yangling sat behind the screen and drank tea slowly. Li Shun was very impressed. In fact, the production efficiency of the two workshops was not as low as imagined outside. I have accumulated a lot in half a year. The most important thing is that with the inventory of the past 6 months as the basis, the workshop has freed up its hands to recruit more workers. Only 1 month of training can greatly increase the output. The orders that come up still have to be queued up, but the time will definitely be shortened a lot. Moreover, Zhu Lianggang reported that they had reduced the cost by another 20%. In this way, the two workshops of Wang Fuguang did not know how much money they made. Even if they spared some energy to design foreigners, the workshops would not be chaotic. After Zhu Liang's good note was presented to Mu Yangling asked Zhu how to greet all the patriarchs, but left Joda, the patriarch of the Zhou family, behind. Joda stayed behind with a smile on his face under the envious eyes of others. No one thought it was impolite for the palace to ask a housekeeper to greet them. The status of merchants is low. They want to do business with the powerful, and most of them deal with people like housekeepers. This time they can see the princess, and the princess will talk to them in person. They are very happy, flattered. Not everyone like Fan Kuagong and Princess Ji don't mind business affairs and are willing to come forward in person. After Joda and the others left, they suppressed the smiles on their faces and stood aside respectfully. Mu Yangling came out from behind the screen and said to him, "Master Zhou, sit down." "Thank you." Princess Joda half sat on the chair after saluting. "Master Zhou, do you know why I left you alone?" "I'm so stupid, please teach me." The Princess Joda bowed his head a little nervously. Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Master Zhou, don't be nervous, we are just talking normally. I heard that our ship will go out to sea recently." "Yes," Joda said, "I have selected a date 3 days later, and plan to take a trip to Nanyang before the Chinese New Year. Several foreigners' ships are going to sea soon. They are going back to their own country," Joda said with a smile. "According to those Westerners, the storms on the route will be much smaller at this time of year, so they usually choose this time to set off in previous years." Mu Yangling nodded secretly, and said, "Then how about you follow Nanyang and follow them all the way to Xiang?" Seeing Joda stunned, Mu Yangling said, "Your order of 2,000 pieces, and Fan Kuagong and I's order of 4,000 pieces are 6,000 pieces in total. You need to take them to Xiang." Seeing Joda's hesitation, Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't make you suffer. If these things can't be sold at the price, we will give you the 4,000 pieces, and I will let you get the profit from this trip to sea 10%, how about it?" Joda didn't dare to accept it, and hurriedly said, "After passing through Nanyang, it is not far from Xiang, not to mention that Xiang is very famous for gems and spices. Even if the glass and clocks can't be sold at a price, it is not a loss for us to go and buy back gems and spices." Mu Yangling didn't force him to accept it. If he lost money, then she would give him some discounts on the workshop orders. Mu Yangling left Joda mainly to tell him, first, try to sell their glazed products and clocks at a high price after landing, and not lower the price unless it is absolutely necessary. Second, find out the products of various places, no matter how high or low, record them all in books and bring them back, including grain and various minerals. Third, inquire about the weapons and equipment of various countries and their sales, and see if they can buy back cannons, even small firearms, and all costs will be charged to the Wangfu. Fourth, inquire about the political situation and exchanges of various countries. Joda's blood was boiling with excitement, and he was so afraid that he broke out in a cold sweat. He knew that if he agreed, he would be very dangerous in the future. Once he was discovered by Western countries, he would be executed as a spy. If he does well, then he and his family can use this to advance. Seeking wealth and insurance, his courage can be seen from the time he worked so hard to get Fan Zijin. Joda knelt on the ground and kowtowed, "Princess, don't worry, the Zhou family will die for the great Qi." Mu Yangling smiled, asked Xiaoting to help him up, and said, "Master Zhou, don't worry, I won't make things difficult for you. The departure time is a bit tight in 3 days. You might as well postpone the time a little bit. You can choose a few loyal and clever people. When people come over, I will teach them how to inquire about the news. You will also listen in when the time comes. Don't worry, what I asked you to inquire about is not confidential information, and nothing will happen." Seeing that Joda was still trembling, Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Didn't I, Da Qi, do nothing to these foreigners' spies?" Joda was startled. "I, Daki, still have foreigners' spies?" "Of course," Mu Yangling said, "if it wasn't for Andre and others, how could the Western countries send envoys to our Daki so soon? I didn't have any contact with them before Daki. There are 4 countries. In other words, they had at least 4 spies from Western countries in Daki," and Joda blushed angrily. Mu Yangling said, "Andre has done a good job. He has been in Daki for more than 20 years. He can not only communicate with merchants and pawns, but also by high-level officials in Guangzhou. What he wants to inquire about is not only me. I don't even know how much of the general information you inquired about, how much Idaki has leaked to him. The Reborn Wife is Farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1006. Joda's eyes widened, completely unexpected that Andre was still a senior spy. He said angrily, "Why didn't you catch him?" Mu Yangling said with a smile, "If you catch this one, there will be another one. Besides, we don't have any solid evidence. Do you think Andre is a professional espionage? He is just a businessman, and it is by the way to spy on news from other countries for his country. Yes, maybe at the beginning, he just simply passed on the outside knowledge back to the motherland, and then he slowly became a senior spy, and what I want you to do is the role of Andre. The West is far away from us. We Daki also disdain their land, but we can't know that they are full of malice towards us without knowing it. In a word, they don't care about each other's land, and they don't want to covet Daki either." Joda made a serious expression, and said seriously, "Don't worry, ma'am, although Joe is just a businessman, he also knows that everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of the country. We can stand upright overseas because our motherland is strong enough. Joe must not. It will make the wolfish ambitions of foreigners succeed." The last bit of reluctance in Joda's heart disappeared. He didn't expect foreigners to have such great malice towards them. How is this different from the barbarians in Dajanexixia? Joda's eyes turned red when he thought of the large area of land lost by the previous dynasty, and the possibility that Daki would be flooded and occupied by foreigners one day. Joda straightened his chest, and strode out of the palace with great ambition. The spies who stayed outside went back to report to their patriarch. The big merchants could only lament the good luck of the Zhou family in private. What about going up when the time is tough? It's also the king of Rongjun who is too domineering. The sea has been banned for 20 years, and it has been noisy for 20 years. When the king of Rongjun and Nqiagong said open the sea ban was really opened. You must know that the sea ban is so easy to open. Yes, they have already brought a lot of money to the 2 of them. But money is hard to buy. I knew it earlier. King Rong didn't care about business matters, but Nqiagong had already selected the Zhou family as a partner. They couldn't surpass the Zhou family for a while. The big merchants regretted that Jota went home non-stop and chose a few loyal and clever servants. After struggling all night, he finally chose the second son to take them there. Jota gave the second son the number of weeks. Doing psychological counseling, from the future of the family to the interests of the country, I repeated what the princess said, and finally took his hand and cried, "I don't want you to do meticulous work, but those foreigners are too hateful. I'm afraid it's inappropriate to hand it over to the servants, since the palace trusts us, we can't let the prince and concubine down." Joshu's eyes were bright, and he asked, "Father, if we make great contributions, can our family become an official?" He puffed out his chest as he spoke. Jota cried for a while and hesitated. "If you do well, the Lord might be able to give your nephew and son a chance." Joshu's eyes sparkled, and he gritted his teeth and said, "I did it, Dad, don't worry, for the sake of my nephew and my son's future, I will definitely work hard. Our family has worked hard for 30 or 40 years, but we have not been able to produce a single person with fame. This time it might work, even if you don't come from the imperial examination, as long as you can be an official. There are no merchants in Daki who do not want to improve their status. Although the merchants are rich, their status has always been low. Sometimes in order to keep their business, they have to curry favor with officials and act like slaves. Not to mention that the economic base determines the superstructure. In ancient China, this statement is applicable, but it is also not applicable, depending on how it is interpreted. But there is one point: if big businessmen want to live well, they have to let their family members become officials, and since the Tang dynasty, there has been a rule that businessmen are not allowed to take the imperial examination. By the middle and late period of the Great Zhou dynasty, through the efforts of emperors such as Zhao, it had become a strict law that the ancestors were merchants, and imperial examinations were not allowed within 3 generations. Daki has not changed this point, but it is indeed difficult for merchants to improve their status. The Zhou family is naturally the same. The children of the Zhou family will not be recorded in the genealogy until they are 10 years old after birth. Why? In order to select seedlings who can study, if there is such a seedling, the family will send him to the family of a farming family in a nearby branch, or record him as the son of the other party, or adopt him in the past, and still live and study with the main family of the Zhou family. Give them some support, they only borrow their identities for imperial examinations, and they are not afraid that the other party will snatch their children or the children will not recognize them. Because apart from the fact that the child's name is recorded under the names of the foster parents, the child is still theirs, and all the blessings of life and nourishment belong to them. At that time, Jota was the only son of Mrs. Zhou, so Mrs. Zhou gritted his teeth and refused to let him enter the genealogy. He waited until he was 10 years old and confirmed that he had no talent in reading before recording him in the genealogy. Regretfully and fortunately, they don't demand that the children in the family must pass the Jinshi examination to become officials. They only want them to pass the examination as a scholar, so that the status of the family will rise a little. It can be said that the purpose of businessmen has never been to be an official to fight for power, but their status. The Zhou family is like this, and so are other big businessmen, but the Zhou family is a little more pitiful. After 40 or 50 years, there is still not a single scholar in the family. It's not that they don't work hard, it's just that the imperial examinations are too difficult, and it's hard for them to find good teachers and books. They lack educational resources and their minds are superfluous, so naturally they can't produce talents. Joshu was also forced to study in the past, and he had a great psychological shadow on this. He felt that there was no root in the Zhou family's blood that could read, and no matter how hard he tried, it was useless. Now that there is another way in front of them, if you don't hurry up, you will be sorry for yourself. For the sake of his son and the family, Joshu felt that it was worth risking his life. Joshu followed his father to the palace with the tragic feeling of a strong man is gone and will never return, but the head guard who came to train them smiled and told them that their first and eternal task is to be a good businessman. Only in this way can their lives and the entire intelligence system be saved. Then the chief guard told them how to be a proper businessman. The weeks since they were 8 years old, buying and selling with money, watching the chief guard teach them how to be a qualified businessman. Many years later, Joshu brought back a lot of valuable information to Daki, but he has been traveling safely among Western countries and became a famous big businessman. Recalling today's training, he sighed earnestly, it's a businessman. So it's always been safe. At this time, the foreigners didn't know that it was only a small fight that caused the series of consequences. If Chihayran captured Pedro, wiped out 2,000 pirates, and captured 560 people, it would be a blockbuster at the moment. Then the foreigners who returned to the motherland after 4 months discovered that the exquisite glazed products and clocks appeared one after another, which was another form of declaration of war. Because there are few clocks and glass products, they only share 1 or 2 pieces each, so after returning to the motherland, they will naturally sell them vigorously, and the prices will be very high. After they sell the things, the people will find out about them. At the same time, exquisite glazed products and clocks appeared in the market one after another, just like theirs, even with more complete types and greater choices. Although they are also very expensive, many people still spend a lot of money to buy them. Their previous promotions were all making wedding dresses for Daki businessmen, which annoyed the foreigners who had no supply. They knew that they should not have rejected Chi Wangfei at the beginning, and they only bought 1 or 2 pieces. They spent more than half a month to open up the market. Let the Han people occupy it. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1007. Of course, this is what happened in Western Ocean 4 months later. At this time, the Westerners were still shocked by Chihayran's iron-blooded method of destroying Pedro's gang of pirates. They felt that this was a sign of Chi's unfriendliness. They were both angry and frightened. I don't understand why the good Chi turned his back on him. Among them, the envoys of Portugal had the most ugly face. Pedro is the count of their country. Although Chi doesn't know his identity, there is nothing wrong with Pedro being a member of their country. Isn't it a blow to them to kill Pedro when they are envoys to Chi? But it is not, because as soon as the news came back, Fan Zijian ran to them happily and told them with great interest that the officers and soldiers of Daki had captured the rebellious Pedro for them in Portugal, so that such inhumane pirates could escape to Daki. It is really a blessing for the 2 countries to ask them to catch it, and it should be celebrated. Fan Zijian also counted Pedro's crimes, and finally asked the Portuguese envoy with empathy, I don't know what serious crimes this Pedro committed in your country, whether he needs to be tried together with Daki, and also counted as victims in your country. An explanation. The Portuguese envoy knocked down his teeth and swallowed his blood, emphasizing, Pedro is not a pirate in our country, but an explorer. Fan Zijian sighed, this man has really changed quickly. When he came out, he was still an explorer whom you admired. After more than 10 years, he turned into a great pirate who harmed one side. He even deceived you to rent land from me, Daki. Fortunately, the court did not agree, otherwise, if we let this big pirate go ashore, we don't know how many innocent fishermen will die. The Portuguese envoy only felt bitter on the tip of his tongue, and said with difficulty, there may be a misunderstanding in this. The reason for Daki's suppression of the bandits this time is that the pirates under Pedro boarded Daki Island to burn, kill, and loot, and it also spread to Guangdong. Chihayran sent troops angrily to the fishermen along the coast. Fan Zijian shook his head, there is no misunderstanding, the sufferer is still in the government office, those fishermen were killed and injured countless, it is very tragic, and the family members of the merchants who were robbed and sunk in the past came to sue, although Pedro is not as good as Dongying's Fujita hero, but the punishment for the crime is also quite a lot, it should be killed. What else could the Portuguese envoy say? Everyone knows that Pedro was a pirate. If he hadn't been caught, he could have swam around for a while. Everyone lived in peace with their eyes closed. Now that Pedro was caught, his men they either died or were captured, and the remaining solitary people also escaped, which was nothing at all. The Portuguese envoy felt a little regretful. He should have revealed Pedro's identity early on, so that the officers and soldiers of Daki should also have some scruples. Although they may be a little restrained in their actions, it is better than losing Pedro's big killer. And now revealing Pedro's identity will undoubtedly make the two countries officially turn against each other, because the relationship between the two countries is much worse than that of other countries because of the pirates and the previous discussions. Can't get out of Daki. The Portuguese envoy could only sigh, secretly lamenting his bad luck, and annoyed that Pedro failed to restrain his men. However, when historians of later generations studied this period of history, both the West and the East agreed that King Rong and Fan Kuagong were lying, and there was no such thing as Pedro's pirates robbing fishermen along the coast. This military action was honor. The king of the county prepared it in advance. Among them, there is a complete record of the Guangdong Navy office at that time. Among them, there is a record of the clerk. Portuguese pirate Pedro, because of the large number of people, the ship is strong and the guns are strong, so he slowly plots it. It also recorded several combat plans, and even had specific time marks. These files were stored in the Guangdong Navy Yamen, and were later placed in the Maritime Military Academy for preservation, providing future generations with a research basis. However, what troubled the historians was that Chihayran took action more than half a month earlier than planned. This made them puzzled for a while. What factors forced him to advance the plan, and it was so long in advance? Historians have researched that period of history over and over again, but have not been able to find out the exact historical basis until the royal family released some materials, the most notable of which is the correspondence between Princess Rongjun and Emperor Taikang at that time. The fact that the sister-in-law communicated with the elder brother can be surprising in itself, but historians are no strangers to it. Everyone knows that the Princess of Rongjun and the King of Rongjun grew up together, and was watched by Emperor Taikang. Growing up, everyone was surprised by the content of the published letter. This series of events is only because their child was beaten. The most eye-popping thing for historians is that the ancestors of the Zhou family, a world-renowned family business, even made a detailed work of Daki. According to the correspondence between Princess Rongjun and Emperor Taikang, the fuse of this matter is still several children were beaten, including Princess Rong, who dumped porcelain, glass, clocks and other handicrafts to European countries. It was also because of several children who were beaten. She seized the European market only because those foreign envoys instructed the Zhou brothers to approach several children, causing them conflicts and fights arose. She just wanted pure revenge. You caused my children to be beaten for this purpose, and I will make your goals fail to be achieved, and you will lose even more. The Western historians who also obtained the research materials were so angry that their eyes were red. Is there anyone who spoils children so much? However, the Chinese historians who hold the historical materials left by their ancestors are very complicated. They don't know whether they should be thankful that they have a pair of princes and concubines who spoil their children so much. In this way, Duke Angguo at that time suddenly attached great importance to the taxation standards of Daki merchants at foreign ports, and it took nearly 5 years to get Western countries to reduce tariffs on Daki products. On the importance of having bare children, this has become a topic of most interest to students of history in later generations. At this time, the bare children who were the culprits were leaning their heads against their heads and imagining a bright future together. They were so greedy that they smashed their mouths and made a wish: I will eat 10 pork knuckles when my injury is healed. 10 lion heads, a bowl of braised pork, a chicken. The little lion looked at his younger brother with contempt, and said, "Don't just think about food, We are thinking about how to avenge Joao and the others. Huda said with a bitter face, but I'm really hungry. My mother said that I'm not allowed to eat these things until my injury is healed. Xiaoan was very helpless. Didn't you just eat corn-stewed ribs just now? You ate all the ribs in a pot. It's too light. I want to eat braised pork knuckle, braised lion head, braised pork. Xiaoan covered his mouth and asked the little lion, why does his appetite suddenly become so good? He has never eaten such a strong taste before. I know, the second prince raised his hand and said seriously, he must be looking more and more like fourth uncle. Fourth uncle likes hard food, and my father also likes it. Huda tore off Xiaoan's hand, stretched out his swollen hand to cover his stomach, and shouted, I feel like my stomach is leaking. No matter how much I eat, I'll be hungry soon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1008. Xiaoan rubbed her chin in thought, could it be that Joao pierced your stomach? But you didn't pull it out, where did your food go? The little lion stared at his stomach eagerly, why don't I touch it for you? Maybe I can touch it? Lidong, who had been standing by the side and waited on them, twitched the corners of his mouth, and said softly, the third young master is recovering from his injuries. This recovery requires nutrition and consumes food, so he feels that he will not be full after eating. Both Xiaoan and the little lion had a bit of rejoicing on their faces, but Qi Wensu had already touched Huda's belly quickly, and exclaimed, it's so soft, so soft. Xiaoan and little lion also became interested. Lidong quickly stopped them, the third young master is still injured, young masters, don't touch his wound. The tiger's head shrank to a corner of the soft couch, and he nodded with sympathy, and whispered, it hurts. Because there are many children in the family, they all like to stay on the soft couch, so the couch in their house is wider than the bed, but now the 4 children are lying on the couch, and the tiger head is hiding in the corner, and the other 3 are also sitting on the same block. They can keep people in the corner, but fortunately they have brotherly love, they didn't pressure him to touch him, and Qi Wensu's kid was very sympathetic and wanted to hurt him. Lidong was afraid that they wouldn't be able to stop their quarrel, so he took the initiative to lead the topic elsewhere, but with Xiaoan around, the topic couldn't go anywhere. The 4 children talked all over the place, and Xiaoan brought the topic back to revenge enter brother Ang. Of course, they were not for themselves, because the 4 children agreed that brother Joao suffered no less injuries than them, and they did not lose this fight. They were for the suffering people of Luzon, and they had to let the invaders, brother Joao, know to their own mistakes. Xiaoan decided to actively search for information, and first prepared to speak before going to brother Joao to settle the score. The 3 children raised their hands and feet in agreement, and Lidong couldn't wish for it more, so he took the initiative to help them move books in the study. Seeing that Lidong was gone, Xiaoan quietly said to San Xiao, look, I'll take Lidong away, let's go out to find Joao and Jose now. The little lion turned to look at the tiger's head, pointed at the medicinal mud all over his body and said, he's still applying it. Or the tiger head can stay at home, Xiaoan suggested. Huda looked at Xiaoan anxiously, his big round eyes were full of tears. Xiaoan was soft-hearted, hesitantly said, how about we wrap you up in gauze and put on clothes? Huda nodded again and again. The little lion and Xiaoan found gauze, and the 3 children wrapped the tiger's head with sweat profusely. Seeing that Qi Wensu had knotted the gauze again, Xiaoan yelled angrily, wrong wrap again, Wensu, you just hold the gauze specifically, and I'll wrap it. The second prince climbed behind Xiaoan's buttocks and hugged the gauze. It was half an hour after the 3 children worked hard to wrap the tiger's head into a rice dumpling. Xiaoan felt that something was wrong. He turned to look at the door, and saw the 4th ant was she pulled a chair and sat at the door, With a teacup and a plate of snacks in hand, she didn't know how long she was looking there. Lidong was standing behind her with a book in her arms, looking at them full of grievances. Xiaoan shrank her neck, stretched out her fingers and poked the lion cub who was excitedly watching the tiger head. Mu Yangling looked at the 4 children standing in front of her with their heads bowed in rows, and focused on the tiger's head wrapped in white cloth, and asked, "What do you want to do?" Xiaoan said in a muffled voice, "We want to go and see Joao and Jose." Mu Yangling put down his teacup, and said softly, "You don't need to look, I can tell you that they are living a miserable life." The 4 children wanted to go out even more. Mu Yangling didn't stop them, but instead asked someone to remove the things from Hutu's body, reapply the medicine, dress him and send him to the carriage. She said, "You also go and see, there are parents and no parents. The difference between you, see how good we are to you, and run out in the future." The 4 children arrived at the Foreigner Chamber of Commerce in a daze. Except for the guards at the gate, they entered the small courtyard where Brother Joao lived almost unimpeded. Neither Joao nor Jose's attendants were in the courtyard. When they heard the sound from the master bedroom, they went straight in. Jose was crying by guarding Joao, and quickly complained to his elder brother in Portuguese. "They all said that because we fought with Hutu and the others, Daki's prince attacked Count Pedro, but Daki's court clearly they said it was because Count Pedro's people robbed the fishermen of Daki. They wronged us, and said that you pretended to be sick, brother, not only did not give us medicine, but even withheld our food." Joao's face was also ugly. 3 days later, his body was still in severe pain, but there was no visible wound. The envoys and doctors did not believe that he was injured. Except for their slaves, other servants began to gossip. Children learn languages quickly, and Xiaoan and the others spent a lot of time with foreigners, and they can understand most of them. Hearing this, he was shocked. He didn't expect Joao and the others to live so miserable. Jose was still crying. Joao struggled to get up, turned around and saw 4 children standing at the door. His body froze. Looking at the tiger head whose face was covered with medicine mud, Joao felt even more guilty. No wound on his body hurts like this, so what kind of pain does the tiger's head hurt? Why did he lose his head and hit hard at that time? And they didn't even mind coming to see him. Joao was ashamed. When Jose saw the 4 children, he thought they were here to visit them. Then he saw the bruises on the faces of the 4 children, and the resentment in his heart disappeared, as if they were hurt more seriously, and they actually come see them regardless. Jose, who was experiencing the indifference of human feelings, was so moved that he burst into tears again. The 4th child who wanted to settle accounts with the 2 of them. The enemy cried like this, how could they have the nerve to attack? The 4 children were silent for a long time before the tiger head said crisply, "Shame, I'm still crying at such an age, so I'm not ashamed." The other 3 children nodded, looked at them with the same contempt, and didn't mention the matter of revenge. They dragged a stool and sat down beside the bed, watching the 2 brothers curiously. "We can all run away, why are you still lying on the bed?" Brother Joao looked at the children with bruises on their faces so alive and kicking, and he couldn't get off the ground without any wounds on his body. He was both scared and ashamed and said, "The place on my body that was beaten by you hurts, but there are no wounds. Our doctor said that I am not injured, but I am obviously in pain. Do you think there is an injury in my body that has not been detected?" The 4 children despised him together. "Your doctor is a quack doctor, isn't he just beaten a few times? It will be fine if you rub it with medicinal wine." Joao thought that the part where he was rubbed away by Dachi did not hurt much, but what should I do if it hurts when rubbed? The 4 children did not expect that Joao was afraid of pain at such an age. They often stretched their muscles and bones when practicing martial arts, and they had to rub medicinal wine. It is common for Hutu to be injured, and it is necessary to rub medicinal wine every 3 to 5 days. Seeing that Joao was afraid of pain, Xiaoan rolled his eyes and said, Why don't we rub it for you? We have been rubbed since we were young, so we should have seen it earlier. The little lion understood and was very enthusiastic. Our family's medicinal wine is a secret recipe of the palace. It is very good. As long as it is rubbed open, it will not work. Look at us, we are so hurt. After rubbing the medicinal wine, we are alive and kicking in only 3 days. Ruoang's heart moved, but Xiaoan didn't wait for his consent, and loudly called the guard outside to go back and get the medicinal wine. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1009. As soon as the Portuguese envoy entered the door, he heard murderous screams from the courtyard of the two viscounts. He was startled and asked, "What's going on?" The attendant rushed over and replied, "Several princes from the palace are treating the viscount. Is this healing or killing?" The Portuguese envoy was coming back from the government office after suffering a lot of anger. Hearing this, he went to the small courtyard without thinking. Xiaoan and the little lion were kneeling on the bed and vigorously rubbing the medicinal wine for Joao. At first he could scream, but now he can only hum and has no strength at all. The little lion rubbed him and asked, "Does it hurt? Does it hurt?" Joao was too painful to answer, so he could only look at him with a distorted face. The little lion regretted, "It doesn't hurt, it's okay, I will try harder. If it doesn't hurt, the bruise won't melt away." Continue to press down hard with his hands. Joao rolled his eyes, and just about to faint, Xiaoan also pressed down hard. Joao's pain sensory nerves were touched, and he woke up from the pain before fainting. Hutu and Chi Wensu stood under the bed enthusiastically and gave them instructions. Jose was on the sidelines in a hurry, and Hutu took the time to comfort him, "Your brother will be fine. We often rub medicinal wine like this when we are injured in martial arts." Jose wondered, "Is it so painful?" Hutu nodded, "Of course, I cried when I took the medicine for the first time." Jose could only express sympathy to his eldest brother with his eyes. "Let's not fight in the future, okay? It hurts too much to fight with you." Hutu curled his lips, "You guys did it first." Jose refused to accept, "Obviously you hit me first. That's why you pointed your finger at my elder brother and you've already pointed at elder brother An's nose, why don't I do it?" Jose was confused, "Why can't you point your finger at Xiaoan's nose?" Hutu despised him, "You foreigners are so stupid, don't you know that pointing at someone is an insult? Our sages have said that scholars can be killed but not insulted. My brother Xiaoan will be the #1 scholar in the future, the first among scholars. If you point it out and don't respond, how can he be the champion in the future?" Jose still couldn't understand, but he also knew that the fight seemed to be caused by him pointing at Xiaoan. Hutu continued, "I just broke your fingers to remind you of this lesson. Who knew that your elder brother beat my second brother and brother Xiaoan, bullying 2 5 or 6-year-old children? In our Daki, you can marry a wife at the age of 13, and we are still children. In Portugal, you can marry a wife at the age of 13. Jose suddenly felt that what he said was very reasonable, and he couldn't refute it for a while. Hutu was happy when he saw that he couldn't refute. He used to rely on fists to speak, but it was the first time he could win with words. It's the bad guys who actually went to invade Luzon, causing the children there to lose their parents, have no food to eat, and no clothes to wear. It's pitiful. My elder brother and brother Xiaobao even squeezed our pocket money to buy food and clothing. Support them. If you don't invade Luzon, then my elder brother and they won't rob us of our pocket money, we can buy a lot of delicious and fun things." Jose opened his mouth and said after a long time, "They are explorers, they are for our great majesty to expand the territory. This is the education he has received since he was a child." Hutu curled his lips in disdain, "It's not a barren land where no one wants you to open up wasteland and expand the land. It's Luzon. They have their own emperors. You rushed to other people's homes and killed their parents and brothers, and then followed them. Your king said, 'This is the territory we have opened up, and those who survive are grateful to you for giving them a household registration, and then let them treat you like cows and horses, so shameless. Nonsense, the Portuguese envoy rushed in angrily, staring at the tiger's head with red eyes. This is a slander to Portugal, please take back such remarks. Seeing the envoy rushing in, Xiaoan and the little lion quickly jumped off the bed, blocked Hutu and the second prince from left to right, and glared at him. What do you want to do? Dare to bully my brother, believe it or not, beat you all over the place looking for teeth. The envoy took a deep breath, suppressed the anger on his face, looked at the four children with deep eyes for a while, and then squeezed out a stiff smile and said, Sirs, you have a lot of prejudice against my country. Luzon is still a tribal model. The natives on it don't even understand basic farming. Our explorers will bring them advanced farming techniques and crafts, and bring them huge wealth. We are helping them and not aggression. Our explorers have always been friendly. The four children did not understand, but they firmly believed that Mu Yangling was right. Since their mother, fourth aunt, said that Portugal was aggression, then they were aggression. What Hutu said just now was when Mu Yangling taught them the metaphor used, because the image is vivid, so even the tiger's head can be remembered. Because of this, the four children who couldn't understand advanced words firmly believed that the envoy was trying to defend himself, but the little lion and the tiger-headed Chi Wensu didn't know how to refute him, but Xiaoan grasped the key point and only asked, friendship will kill them, family? Let them submit to their feet for their own good. The envoy said confidently, this is a last resort. We are doing it for their own good. They will understand and thank us in the future. The eyes of the four children were a little erratic, and Xiaoan was surprised, so it's still possible? Then if we kill you now, will your family thank us? Hutu added earnestly, we are also doing it for your own good. The little lion grinned, send you to see the Tathagata Buddha, Amitabha earlier. Chi Wensu poked his head out from behind, and said with bright eyes, then let's do more good deeds and kill them all. Their families will be grateful to us, right? Seeing the envoy's face turned purple with anger, but there was nothing they could do about them, the four children made faces and ran out, while Xiaoan was going out while instigating against the Joao brothers, don't follow them, they are so stupid and they will kill you as well, stupid. Joao and Jose lowered their heads and did not speak. After all, they are several years older. These days, their outlook on life, the world, and their values have all been greatly impacted. They have vaguely realized that these words of the envoys are just superficial reasons, and the real essence is that they need the land of Luzon, the labor of Luzon, and the port of Luzon, which can bring them benefits. Joao thought more about it. Did the envoys and adults know this? They knew they were bad people, but they still did it? Are they really expanding the territory for His Majesty? Or is it for the title after the expansion of the territory, for the status and gold and silver treasures in the future? Is he going to be a part of it too? Joao was in a trance, while Jose was simply sad that he was really the bad guy that Tiger had said, he was a bad guy. But he obviously wants to be a good person. The child, who was only in his early 10 years old, looked at his elder brother helplessly, tears welling up. The envoy failed to understand the entanglement and conflict in the hearts of the two brothers, but said bitterly, they are not allowed to come to the guild hall again in the future. The Daki people are very unfriendly to us. It is better for the two viscounts to recuperate in the courtyard. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1010. Fourth elementary school felt much better after messing around in the guild hall, and looked at the bustling street outside and suddenly didn't want to go home. Xiaoan suggested, let's go shopping. Hutioyu touched his pocket subconsciously, and found that he didn't bring any money, so he looked at them anxiously, I didn't bring any money. Xiaoan and Little Lion didn't bring either. They hadn't thought about going shopping before, so naturally they didn't bring money on purpose. The second prince also touched his pockets, only to find that he had no pockets on his clothes, but he had a pouch with him, and when he opened it, there were 2 silver nudes inside. The 3 older ones cheered up, "Let's go buy food." The 4 of them went shopping happily, and the guards followed closely without stopping them, but as soon as Huda picked up the food, someone would come forward to stop him or take away the food in his hand. Huda stared. The guard's explanation: "Your injury is not healed yet, so you can't eat outside food. So what's the point of him shopping?" Huda was grimacing when a carriage stopped next to him. Fan Zijan opened the curtain, glanced at the 4 children, and focused on the things they were holding until the children had no choice but to take the snack away. The guard behind him said, "Come up, I'll take you to pick up your father and 4th uncle." The eyes of the 4 children lit up, and they climbed into the carriage one after another. Huda said excitedly, "My father has returned in triumph." Fan Zijan nodded. "He captured Pedro alive, which means he wiped out all the pirates in the sea area of Guangdong. Not only the Navy Yamen and Fu Yamen, but also the people in the city will come to welcome him at the port." The 4th little one looked outside and saw that everyone was indeed walking out of the city. They all became excited. "What about my elder brother and them? They went back home to pick you up. Who knew you went to the foreigners' hall?" Fan Zijan took a look at their excited faces, and asked, "Did you go to torment Brother Joao today?" Xiaoan hurriedly clarified, "No, we went to visit them and brought them a bottle of medicinal wine." Fan Zijan snorted coldly, and didn't believe it at all, but as long as the children didn't suffer, he didn't ask any deeper questions at all. The 4th child breathed a sigh of relief. The adults often taught them how to be gentlemen. If they knew that they tortured Brother Joao so carefully, they would definitely scold them. Chi Heiran wiped out another group of big pirates. The people of Guangzhou cheered and gathered around the seaside to watch. Some people specially prepared rotten vegetables and leaves to smash people, and some people grabbed small stones on the side of the road without preparation. Si Xiao jumped out of the carriage and exclaimed when seeing the dense crowd by the seaside, "Is there too many people here?" Little Xiong and Xiaobao squeezed close to the 4 of them, and couldn't help twisting their ears. "It's in vain for us to run home, thinking that you guys won't be able to keep up with the heroic appearance of your father returning home in triumph." Seeing so many people frowning, Fan Zijan called 2 magistrates and said, "There are too many people, accidents are inevitable, all the servants of the government office are brought in to maintain order, and the people should not be pushed into the sea, especially be careful of trampling on them." The 2 magistrates responded and left with a serious face. Little Xiong said excitedly, "There are also people from the villages and counties below here. They all came here to celebrate after hearing that my father wiped out the pirates in this area." Xiao Bao's face was also beaming. "4th uncle is amazing. Many people said that they will set up longevity plagues for 4th uncle and Father Huang." The 4th little one was also excited. They were relatively short, and after jumping twice, they still couldn't see them, so they asked the guards to put them on their shoulders and sit and watch. Little Xiong and Xiaobao were envious, but they thought they had grown up, so they refused to sit on the shoulders of the guards. Xiaobao looked around, pointed to a relatively high stone by the sea and said, "Little Xiong, can you move it here?" Little Bear gestured, nodded happily, "Yes." After speaking, he happily jumped over to pick up the big rock and put it where they were standing, and the 2 stood directly on it to watch. The foreigners who also came to watch widened their eyes and opened their mouths, looking at the big rock and then at the little bear in disbelief. André was also shocked. He swallowed, and said to his attendant Paul, "Isn't it said that the situation of Princess Rongjun is a special case? Why can her son be so strong even at such a young age?" Paul hesitated. "Is it genetic?" André looked at those children with complicated expressions, and asked, "Is it only inherited from this one, or are they all inherited? How many people still have such an inheritance in Daki?" Paul was ashamed and said, "I'm sorry, my lord, I can't give an answer yet." André shook his head slightly, and said, I heard Princess Rongjun say by chance last time that she is far inferior to King Rongjun. I heard that the reason why King Rongjun is so powerful is because he has Kung Fu. Great strength is born, yes, Kung Fu is acquired. If the Qi has the acquired knowledge to become so powerful, then we will never be able to achieve what we plan. Paul, we have to find out more. But my lord, Dezhou and De Qi were very weak in the past, and only 40 or 50 pirates could beat their officers and soldiers to pieces. But have you seen that the officers and soldiers of Daki have lost in the past 2 years? Andre's voice was barely audible. They haven't lost, but the pirates on the island have been wiped out. Maybe they said it's true that Daki kept losing before, not because they were incompetent, but because we bribed their officials, so they lost. Andre's eyes lit up, as if he had found another way. Maybe we can try again. But King Rong is very strict with corrupt officials. It is said that as long as they are caught, the whole family will be implicated. Andre lowered his eyes and did not speak. He raised his head and looked over when he heard the cheers resounding through the sky. Chi Heiran came down from the boat in armor, followed by a group of soldiers escorting his old acquaintance Pedro. Chi Heiran walked down with a cold face and did not look sideways. His eyes swept across the crowd, and seeing 6 children who were standing extremely high and excited, he held back his gaze from staring at them and strode towards Fan Zijian. Fan Zijian looked at him with a smile, and said in a low voice, "Take Pedro all the way back to Fukan? Let the people have fun too." Chi Heiran twitched his eyes, and said, "I'm afraid he will be crushed to death before he reaches the gate of the city. Let's just put him in a prison van and take him away. What if something happens to so many people? Tell the government officials to evacuate the crowd quickly." Chi Heiran was about to turn around and carry the children back, when out of the corner of his eye he saw the person standing on the rock behind him. His eyes suddenly widened, and he looked over in disbelief. Mu Yangling, who was wearing men's clothing, was grinning at him with his white teeth, and looked at him with a smile like a flower. Chi Heiran felt his heart warm, but he murmured, "Nonsense." "What?" Fan Zijian turned his head to follow his gaze, only saw a piece of human head, and asked, "What are you looking at?" Chi Heiran withdrew his gaze and said, "It's nothing." Fan Zijian pulled him back, "You have to straddle the horse and parade through the streets, so you can't just go back in a hurry. I'll watch the children, and you just have to play your hero." If it was a quarter of an hour ago, Chi Heiran would have disdained to do such a thing, but now he has no objection. Instead, he walked forward with his head held high, mounted his horse with a beautiful movement, and let the soldiers behind him line up and march into the city together. Fan Zijian's eyes widened, and he took another look at the place Chi Heiran was looking at just now. He thought he would spend a long time persuading him. Why did this kid suddenly become so upbeat? Standing on the stone, Mu Yangling looked excitedly at Chi Heiran, who was parading across the street, wishing to tell the world that that handsome young general was my husband. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1011. Compared with the cheerful atmosphere of the Guangzhou people, the foreigners are a little frightened. I don't know if Daki has changed their policies. After arriving at the port, they went to the city shipping department and the government office to inquire about the news. When Fan Zijian received the news, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. "This is a surprise. My lord, the Portuguese envoy is here again. He has come to ask us how to deal with Pedro and a group of captives, and asked if they can be handed over to their own country. Also, the Portuguese envoy hopes that in the future, all crimes involving the Portuguese will be dealt with. It's up to them to convict and deal with." Fan Zijian laughed out of breath. What a big face. Fan Zijian did not have the idea of judicial independence, but he knew the consequences of letting a barbarian dictate the laws of Daki. Fan Zijan said directly, just type it out, and then send someone to the foreigners' hall to inquire about the identity of the Portuguese envoy, saying that we suspect that he is a fake envoy. Yan Mo, who stood aside, was embarrassed for a moment, feeling that the master's move was cruel enough, and the servant's servant was also taken aback for a moment, and then retreated silently. So did the magistrate ask them to check the documents in the envoy's hands. That was a shame and a shame. Envoys from so many countries, including Portuguese envoys, were re-examined. But don't blame your lord, that envoy is too ungrateful. While fighting with the magistrate, he spends a lot of money to bribe the officials under him, but he doesn't know that as soon as they leave, those officials put things in front of the magistrate. Honestly, hand it in, everyone knows that King Rong hates corrupt officials the most. Master Fan's eyes are as bright as the sun, who dares to play tricks under their hands. Although the prefect put half of it in the treasury, and the other half will be distributed to the people below, but no one is grateful to the Portuguese envoys, who knows when the people below will cramp and stop, and there will definitely be another turmoil at that time. 2 years ago, due to collusion with pirates, 1/3 of Guangdong officials were killed and arrested. Until now, the staff of officials is still not fully staffed. They don't want to experience another turmoil. The petty official took people to the foreigners' club, but Fan Zijan began to think about how to deal with the captives. They couldn't kill everyone. If they wanted to kill Heiran, they could just kill the people on the island, but they couldn't if they didn't kill them. Keep it closed all the time, how much food will it cost? But if the exile is not appropriate, these foreigners are different from the Han people. When they arrived in the wild exile, they were either burned to death, or they escaped by murder, so Fan Zijan became distressed. Or should we still follow Heiran's method, drag those who have killed Daki people to the beach and chop them up, and let the Portuguese redeem those who haven't? Fan Zijan's plan was good, but it was useless, because the Portuguese envoy was unwilling to redeem other pirates except Pedro, but the problem was that Fan Zijan never thought of releasing Pedro, and even if he only redeemed one person, he still killed Daki humans. What about the remaining pirates? But the Portuguese envoy was obviously also angered by his series of methods. The dead pig was not afraid of boiling water and said that he had no money, so he could only try his best to redeem Pedro. Fan Zijan returned home angrily, only to find that his wife and children were not at home. He asked the housekeeper angrily, "Where are the madam and young masters?" Housekeeper Xia lowered his head and whispered, "Yan's his whose family held a chrysanthemum banquet, and madam took the 7 young masters to the banquet together." Fan Zijan was stunned and asked, "How much?" 7, Xia Guanjia said, "Madam originally only wanted to take the 5 young masters, but when the eldest young master and Qi Shizi heard that the storyteller at the banquet wanted to make jokes about the prince's arrogance, they made a fuss and asked for it. Go, madam will take it with you." Fan Zijan twitched the corners of his mouth. These children have recently become obsessed with storytelling. They would run to the tea house every day after class. After hearing a story about Qi Heiran's heroic killing of the enemy, they would come back to learn from them. At first they could still laugh. They listened to it, but after 2 days, they were tired of listening to it. Those jokes were just nonsense, but a few children still believed it. What about the prince? Steward Xia thought for a while and said, "I didn't see the prince go out today." Fan Zijan turned around and went to the next door to find someone. Qi Heiran was hugging Mu Yangling and wanted to do something wrong. Hearing Li Shun's reply, Qi Heiran lay on Mu Yangling's body, and said angrily, "What does Zijan want from me in the afternoon?" Mu Yangling pushed him away and said, "Hurry up and take a look, maybe there is something urgent." Qi Heiran muttered and put on his clothes and went to meet people in front. Hearing that he came just for such a matter, he was dissatisfied and said, "What kind of big deal is this? Do you need to come in person? Just ask someone to ask." "Hey, that's a big deal. You, the co-author, had an idea early in the morning. King Rong, please tell me and let me hear your great opinion. Fan Zijin looked at it leisurely while holding a tea. Chi Heiran proudly said, I have planned it long ago. If Pedro is not killed, the Portuguese envoys will redeem it with gold and silver treasures. Fan Zijin frowned. This Pedro is not a simple character who has dominated the waters of Guangdong for more than 10 years. This time you killed him by surprise, and you can catch him in a pinch. You may not have such luck next time. Heiran, you are good at fighting, but the people below are not as capable as you, and you will leave Guangdong sooner or later, and there will be such a poisonous snake outside, it will not be good for Daki. I know, but it is precisely because Pedro is so powerful that I am not willing to kill him at once. Fan Zijin frowned even tighter. Since when did you like playing this kind of show? Although Fan Zijin is consciously smart, he is never arrogant. When he encounters an enemy, he can be crushed to death in a budding state, and he will never be given a chance to thrive. Heiran is the same. As long as he has the opportunity to kill the enemy, he will never hug him. Let go of the other party with boring ideas such as cultivating opponents. Chi Heiran said, if I can kill Andre now, I will definitely kill Pedro. What does this have to do with Andre? It didn't matter before, but now it does. Chi Heiran's eyes turned cold. You know, Andre and Pedro have competition, but they also cooperate. Pedro said that Andre not only bribed Guangdong officials, but even he has some connections with officials in the capital. Pedro's count status is not a secret, but none of you would have imagined that Andre was also named count in Spain. Even the businessmen in their own country don't know what he wants to do. Fan Zijin pondered. Chi Heiran snorted coldly. Pedro said that the reason why he asked the Portuguese envoy to propose leasing Daki's land was because Andre wanted to lease it very much. He didn't understand the key to it, but felt that it was not easy. Originally he wanted to kill Pedro and then kill Andre, but Pedro said that after more than 20 years, Andre's business in Daki had gone deep into the mainland, and no one knew how many of his spies there were, and will these resources be left to Spain? I think so. If Andre is killed at this time, it will be more difficult for us to pull out those nails. At that time, the master simply pretended to be angry and told him that I could, so the exact reason to go to the island is because of the information provided by Andre. He has spies on the island. Pedro believes me at least 80%. If I release him, do you think he will seek revenge from me or find an Andre? The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1012. Fan Zijin raised his eyebrows, not objecting. Then I'll let you do this. He has already planted a thread with Pedro, so it is better for him to let him go. Pedro had a lot of lives in his hands, and he was the leader of the bandit. Of course, they couldn't just let him go, but it was easy. They took so many prisoners this time, and they only needed to use one of them to pretend to be Pedro. Let the hair down, let them grow the beard a little longer, and mix it up. Who can find that he is not Pedro? But they can't let go in vain. Chi Heiran and Pedro agreed that after he leaves, he must use money to redeem those foreigners who don't need to be beheaded. The price is the same as before, and Pedro's ransom is even more. Pedro is now a poor man, and all his treasures are found by Chi Heiran and brought back to fill the treasury and internal treasury, so he can only count on the Portuguese envoys. But will Chi Heiran personally talk to the Portuguese envoy? It's out of the question. So the head of the prison approached the Portuguese envoy, saying that he could help him smuggle Pedro out, but he had to ask for money. The Portuguese envoy sent the prison head out, and when he turned back, his face was slightly ugly. It was like a lion's mouth, but he couldn't lower the price for a long time. The other party was very bachelor. Pedro died. Of course, the Portuguese envoys couldn't watch Pedro die. Leaving aside Pedro's count status, Pedro couldn't die in the current situation. Most of their news about Daki came from Pedro. Although there are quite a few businessmen from Portugal who came to Daki to do business, none of them knew much about Pedro. Now Daki is not friendly enough to them. In order not to let their country fall behind, Pedro must live. The Portuguese envoy thought of Pedro's family background, and felt that even if he spent a lot of money, he would be able to return it when Pedro came out. The Portuguese envoy thought this way, and then asked people to start preparing gold, silver, and jewelry. The other party asked for too much money, and the gold and silver were not enough, so they could only use jewelry and spices to pay for some. So, one night before the execution, a donkey cart loaded with several corpses came out of the prison, and Pedro, who was lying on the cart loaded with corpses, was brought back by the people who had ambushed there in advance when he was thrown at the cremation ground, the clubhouse. Pedro's face was fine. He put on clean clothes calmly and said to the envoy, "I still have 68 brothers who have not been sentenced to death. Please, my lord envoy, buy them out for me." The envoy shook his head in embarrassment. "Your Excellency, the cost is too much, we simply cannot afford it. You must know that I paid a very high price to bring you out. Don't worry about this. I will return the money to you when I return to the motherland." Pedro doesn't think money is a problem. Those people have been with him for a long time. If Chiharan doesn't mention it, he will try his best to redeem those who can survive. Seeing Pedro's insistence, the envoy had no choice but to borrow money from the merchants to redeem it. When the Portuguese envoys redeemed the pirates who had not been sentenced to death, they hurriedly left. Pedro was hidden in their clubhouse and did not dare to stay for a long time, otherwise they would be discovered by the officers and soldiers of Daki, and even the envoy team would not be able to leave. Who knows that something happened just before boarding the boat? Joao and his younger brother were reluctant to board the boat because they were sick and there was a lack of medical care on board. If they boarded the boat, they would probably die on the way. Stay in Daki. The envoy agreed with little thought. Brother Joao was sent on board because their stepmother didn't want to see them. They said they were envoys, but it was tantamount to exile. Otherwise, who would have a delicate and well-built teenager in his teens? You must know that the death rate of long-distance voyages is very high. Not to mention the storms encountered at sea, sudden diseases alone can kill people. If the two brothers don't return to China, maybe their parents will thank him. So the Portuguese envoy agreed without even thinking about it, and gave them a bag of gems as living expenses. Joao sneered, unwilling to accept. Gemstones are not very rare in their country, at least this bag is not worth much in his eyes. Knowing that the two brothers went to sea is equivalent to exile, Joao not only took all their property with him when he left, but also brought all the servants who were loyal to the two brothers, so to a certain extent, the Joao brothers were not short of money. At least the high-quality gemstones they brought would allow them to live well in Daki, so there was no need for him to owe favors to the envoys. The envoy didn't force it on him either, and he boarded the ship after telling them to take good care of their health. Pedro hid among the crew and looked at the two children under the boat, and said to his subordinates, "They are wolves." The envoy made a mistake. He lost 2 wolves. He will regret it later. Your Excellency, do you want to make a good relationship? After all, we have to come back. Pedro shook his head. If they're still alive when we get back, I'll think about it. From now on, only the two brothers will be left in Daki. Joao is terrified, and he can't help but hold his brother's hand tightly. Joao watched the boat go farther and farther, and his eyes were filled with tears. He also had some fear in his heart, but more relieved and excited, he shook his brother's hand back and said word by word, "We will have a good life." José's lips were still trembling. When the fleet of envoys was there, they were also part of it. Everything is up to the adults to decide. They just need to walk around, see Daki's customs, or be friends with Xiaoxiang and the others. Just inquire about Daki's situation, whether it's good or bad, adults will take care of it when the sky falls. Although they knew that no one in the fleet really cared about them except for a few servants of their own family, the fleet was still their reliance and could be regarded as their home. But now their support is gone, and they have no home. Looking around, they only know Xiao Xiang and them in Guangzhou. Seeing that his younger brother's hands were shaking violently, Joao squeezed his hand even more. Let's go and play with Hudu and the others. They brought medicine to visit us a few days ago, and we haven't thanked them yet. Jose nodded sullenly. The two brothers took their servants to the palace in a mighty way. Hudu and the little lion were shaking their heads and reading the textbook aloud. When they heard someone calling them outside, Hudu and the little lion immediately put down the textbook and looked at Mr. Qian eagerly. Mr. Qian turned a blind eye and continued to explain the three-character classic. He even patted the heads of the two with the book, and said, I have learned the Analects of Confucius but forgot the three-character classic. No one is allowed to leave the classroom. The tiger head and the little lion picked up the textbook in a dejected manner and continued to memorize it, closing their eyes from time to time, and opening them to glance at the textbook from time to time. They have learned the three-character classic long ago, and they have memorized it before. Shouldn't this chapter be turned over? Who knew that Mr. Qian would go back to the carbine and ask them to recite the three-character classic after teaching the Analects of Confucius? It was so sudden and they hadn't reviewed it before. How could they be able to recite it? Of course, Xiaoan was excluded.